Welcome to On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton and Jeff Howe of On Texas Football. This episode of On Texas Football brought to you by Dr. Brett Robin, the orthopedic specialist over at Austin Orthopedic Institute. We'll talk about him a little bit later. What's interesting about this one, guys, and I think it's very fun that Brett Robin is sponsoring the running back update here. One of the things that we came up and wanted to talk about this morning, or today at least on Thursday, was the running back room, because some of the news revolved around that room yesterday during the first practice. Cedric Baxter returning to the field. He was a full go for most of practice, at least at parts that we saw. Steve Sarkisian said he was there as well. Then we also saw Christian Clark go ahead of Jarrett Gibson in line, at least for the number threes. Of course, then followed by Jarrett Gibson, James Simon, and Ricky Stewart. Leading it off, though, of course, was Trey Weisner, the returning 1,000-yard rusher. Gerry, just general thoughts before we talk specifically about each player. General thoughts for you on the running back room right now.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things for me was a lot of similar frame guys in the running back room for me. Like, there's not a giant out there at running back, right? I mean, Cedric Baxter's the biggest guy. So what, 6'2", 223. So there's not the 6'3", 6'4", 240-pound back. We didn't expect there to be. But with a Trey Weisner, that more of that streamlined running back build, similar to Ricky Stewart. Ricky Stewart came in looking like a slot receiver, kind of like what Trey Weisner did, has to build his frame out. Christian Clark, Jarrett Gibson, more compact guys. Clark's a taller guy, has a little more weight on him, but more compact builds at the running back position. James Simon, kind of a mix of all of that, but more in the line of Christian Clark, but not as quite as big in the legs. So a lot of similar frame running backs is one of the things I noticed right out of the gate.
What about you, Jeff? You were watching the running backs. I saw you doing that quite a bit yesterday. What were your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts were twofold. One, CJ Baxter, when I saw that he was listed at, I think he's listed actually at 229 on the roster or something like that. I started freaking out thinking about Jonathan Gray after his big injury, got too big. So I was like, oh man, this CJ Baxter is going to be rocked up and have muscles on muscles. Like, no, it's pretty fine. And actually, you look at his body, I think once he gets into camp and obviously with this heat, I think he's going to drop a little weight. So I feel much better about CJ Baxter's prognosis. And you mentioned it, Bobby, the fact that Christian Clark is working ahead of Jarrett Gibson. Like, look, I don't know that they've got anybody that can in the backfield that can do the same things Jaden Blue did last year. But you look at it, not just the rushing attempts. Jaden Blue had over 50 targets in the pass game, and Christian Clark might be the guy with the skill set closest to Jaden Blue, even if it's still a ways off from what Blue could do in the pass game. So there's no question. Everybody's excited about CJ Baxter's return, and rightfully so. It looks like Christian Clark's going to be a factor in this whole deal before all's said and done.
I think that he will be as well. I've been high on Christian Clark for a while, but he has a burst to him as well. And I've mentioned this on a couple of different times, including this morning's Coffee and Football. I think he plays the screen game well. Even just when he's repping it in practice, he's got a little bit of a feel for it. Which is something that we'll see if that transpires. But let's start with the real story of camp, and that's Cedric Baxter, guys. Look, Sark said yesterday he's only at 80%. It was clear to us on some runs yesterday that he was definitely still at 80%, if 80%.
If,
right?
Yeah.
Now, there were other times when he looked like he was closing in on 100. Okay. And to Jeff's point, he is well put together right now. He's clearly taken this recovery 100% seriously, giving it everything he's got. No questions asked. Additionally, he's established himself as a leader of the football team. Steve Sarkisian in his press conference yesterday mentioned how Cedric Baxter went before the team and spoke Tuesday night. It wasn't Arch Manning or Michael Taft or Colin Simmons or Anthony. It was Cedric Baxter. So that gives you a mentality kind of thought on where CJ Baxter is. The question I have after watching him in one day of practice is he's at 80% now. Is he ever going to be back to 100 of what he was? Because he's still got a little bit of a hitch in the giddy up. I mean, And so while we say, oh, it's coming, he's getting back on, do we know how long it's going to take for him to get to 100%? I mean, obviously the answer is we don't know yet because he hasn't gotten there, but that was my takeaway as much as anything is, will Cedric Baxter actually ever get back to 100%? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Gerry, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a few. One, you will never get back to 100% wearing a big brace, right?
Yeah,
you never be the same player. So what was interesting is those braces are made to restrict your bend on some level, right? So is the brace restricting him a little bit? That is a question only he can answer, or the Texas medical staff can answer. But there's definitely a little difference in his gait. And you would expect that. There was at the softball celebration when he was there, him and Trevor Gooseby were there supporting the softball team. Mia Scott, obviously, is Cedric's girlfriend. And I watched him walk for about 100 yards, and there was a difference in his gait still. And we had said that on air, even when he was cleared for football activities. We're like, that's a long way away from getting hit on your knee and actually playing a football game. But I think the thing with Cedric is, what I like what Texas is doing is they're slowly building his confidence back, Jeff. So when he is ready to start taking the hits, that it's not like he's just watching on the sidelines, doing a few drills here. They're trying to keep him involved and get him back involved as much as possible. So when his time comes, and only him and Sark and the medical team know when his time comes, that he is there physically and mentally ready to go.
That is the big thing, Gerry, is the confidence aspect of it, because I think what we got to remember with his injury, this wasn't just like your run-of-the-mill ACL tear. This was a multiple ligament injury, and for a running back where you're relying on your ability to press the hole and make a violent cut and then get vertical, that's a huge, huge part of it, to say the least. And I compare it to, I've always said, Gerry, in his return, it's not going to be until that first live period, whenever it is, that first live scrimmage where he's full contact and he sees the hole close and he's got to make a cut and get up the field. It's not going to be until then that everybody really knows, okay, what's the realistic timeline for him to get back? Because even if you think about it, even if you kind of restrict him and say, okay, well, we'll just use him like in short yardage goal line situations where, he's not having to cut as much and it's just more straight line stuff. Well, at that point, you don't either want a setback, or B, you don't want him to be like 80% or 85% of what he is. You want him to be close to 100. I compare it to, and I've talked to enough pitchers over the year that have had Tommy John, and they say you can go through all the simulated games and live bullpens and everything like that, but until that first time comes, or you got to throw that four-seamer and you've really got to let it go, you don't know how your body's going to react, how your brain's going to react. That to me is where CJ Baxter is. So I say that to say the mental part to me with him is every bit as important, if not more so, than the physical.
Hey, Bobby, real quick to finish that off is we talk about the cutting on that leg in planning and having because the big thing is planning and your body's going a different direction, right? That's the scary thing for a running back or an athlete that has an ACL, because but he had multiple ligaments. How does a great running back has to be able to bend his knee and pick his feet up.
Yeah.
There are very few guys who can scoot like Gerald Moore did their whole career. You got to be able to, that bend in the knee is the key.
I will add this. I mean, Gerry, you pointed this out. Not going to know until full pads come on, et cetera. That won't happen. So even though we'll see a little bit of practice later today, that won't happen for Cedric Baxter until next week when the pads do come on. So we'll talk about that. I want to say thank you real quick, if you don't mind, to our sponsor of today's show. That is Dr. Brett Robin of the Austin Orthopedic Institute. Appreciate him for sponsoring On Texas Football. And like I said, he is a former Texas running back, so this is particularly appropriate that he's sponsoring this episode. Dr. Robin knows what it takes to stay in the game, and he's here for athletes of all ages, specializing in musculoskeletal health. Dr. Robin treats joint pain and injuries with a conservative approach first, but also offers advanced surgical options, including arthroscopic procedures, fracture management, and total joint replacements. With convenient offices in Austin, Georgetown, and Killeen, Dr. Robin is accepting new patients now. If you're looking for top-notch orthopedic specialist, give Dr. Robin a call, 512-856-1000. Get back to your active lifestyle and doing what you love. Again, that's 512-856-1000, 512-856-1000. All right, let's flip the script a little bit and talk about a healthy running back, completely healthy, who is also coming off a big-time year, and that's Trey Weisner. Listening to Sark in the post-practice press conference yesterday, he described Wisner as the Energizer Bunny, kind of the heartbeat of the team because he's always going. Somebody that how he just practices that way. That's how he is when he's on a football field. Yet what we've seen, and I think this is what I want to get into when we talk about Trey Weisner, is a continuous development of his body. I mean, when he came into Texas, he looked like he was going to be 175 pounds dripping wet. And now he looks like a good 205. That he's getting bigger and the right way. He's not getting overly bulky. What did y'all see from him this yesterday that you liked, didn't like, et cetera?
Biggest thing is retaining your quickness as you gain weight. And he's done that. That's number one. Otherwise, all the skill set was the same. And I'll let Jeff get into it. But when you think about it, the guy that was number 3 on the depth chart a year ago this time had 270 touches last season, as it turned out. But his toughness is, I think, his number one thing. Yes, you have to have the instincts. You have to have the vision. He sees the cutback. But his size, the touch at 270 times last year, it's the toughness. But the thing I noticed yesterday was his quickness is the same as he's building that frame out.
Hat tip to Torrey Becton for doing that. What you got, Jeff?
That's where I was going to go, Bobby. I think about, I mentioned Jonathan Gray earlier. Keontae Ingram was another one, a guy that I felt like, needed to add some armor, but I think got too big, too bulky. I don't worry about that with Trey Weisner. My thing with him is don't get caught up on the number, because I know when the roster came out, I think he was listed right at 200 last year. I think he's at 194. And some people were freaking out saying, okay, he lost weight. What's that going to look like? Don't worry about it, because he looks very, very capable of carrying the load. And you got to think, too, last year, even with his body not where it is now, there was only 7 backs in FBS that had 50 targets in the pass game and 200 rushing attempts. He was one of them. So he carried the workload like I wouldn't have expected him to last year and came out on the other side. I'm not surprised about Sark's comments about him being the Energizer Bunny, especially when you go back to his freshman year, just how violently he threw his body around covering kicks and on special teams. And that's one of those deals where you're like, man, if that translates to his actual position he plays, they might have something. And yeah, they've got something. Don't forget, he is the leading returning rusher in the SEC from last year. Had over 1,064 yards, 4.7 per carry. So yeah, he's we can talk about CJ Baxter and Christian Clark, but don't forget you've got a lead back who's going to be a factor.
Let's talk next, Jeff. I'm going to stay with you. Christian Clark ahead of Jarrett Gibson. Surprising or not to you?
Not for this reason, Bobby. I think you mentioned it earlier, talking about Christian Clark in the screen game. With Jaden Blue gone, that's 58 targets from the backfield that are missing. Now, I think some of those are going to get spread out to wide receiver a little bit, but you've got to have that back who can get it done in the pass game. And I think too, what is Arch comfortable with as far as the back throwing to the backs? It's not just what those guys can handle. It's what is Arch comfortable with. And we saw Jaden Blue kind of expand the route tree last year, some more of those circle routes, those Texas routes getting vertical a little bit. It might be more screen game exclusive this year. And if that's the case, then yeah, Christian Clark's going to have a role on this team. Because again, I don't think you've got anybody that can do what Jaden Blue did last year, but Christian Clark might be the guy that's got the closest skill set, the closest ability to do that.
Gerry, Clark, and Gibson, what'd you think?
Yeah, look, I think the thing with Christian Clark is, one, he's a fast healer. That's a great thing to be in life. And two, he has zero hesitation in what he does coming off a major injury like that is super impressive. And to Jeff's point, there was 176 touches that are gone with Jaden Blue. That's carries in 134 carries, 42 receptions, 176. And Gibson had 78 carries last year. Between Clark and Gibson, until we know what CJ Baxter is going to be and when he's going to be that, what portion of that does Gibson eat into? What portion of that does Christian Clark have of that? That's going to be what I'm watching for this season, because I do think Texas will want to get Jarrett Gibson a little bit more, see, as long as ball security is improved, while also building Christian Clark up for the future as well and getting him those touches. And And like Jeff said, I think the passing game leads to Christian Clark getting more of the touches, as well as, I think, red zone.
Yeah, I like Christian Clark. I've mentioned him for a couple years now, actually, going back to before he got had his Achilles injury. But the one thing I would point out about Jarrett Gibson, Sark and Chad Scott had said that Jarrett Gibson had reshaped his body this summer. Boy, has he. Yeah. He's a different looking dude out there. He had a little, I don't want to call it baby fat, but you know what I mean? He's coming out of high school, going to college last year. All that's gone. He looks, he's just extraordinarily muscular, and he's definitely done some work in the weight room to get ready for the season. James Simon and Ricky Stewart. Ricky Stewart showing some burst. James Simon looking particularly good in the pass game. Gerry, you agree with that?
I think he looks good overall, but yes, I mean, but he should. I mean, we've talked about this. We've had John Simon, his father, on the show, a longtime college coach that played the position. His kid's going to be advanced in pass pro, understanding a scheme, understanding of the screen game and the passing game, and he looked very comfortable. I mean, he got a couple of balls in the flats from KJ Lacey where, I mean, he just looks like, look, I mean, after Emery Winston and Emmett Mosley, James Simon looks like he has the next set of hands, amongst those guys. I mean, he had really soft hands. He caught it in stride, just turned right up the field, no hesitation, no wasted movement. Got a good frame to continue to build on. I think eventually he'll be 217, 219 pounds. I think he's probably around 205, 207 now. And he'll add more upper body strength to go with more lower body strength. But now we'd heard he had a really good spring. I like everything about James Simon. The whole key there is, it's a hard rotation to break into and get meaningful snaps. So I think the snaps he gets in games 2, 3, and 4 are going to kind of shape. And I'd say this for Clark and Gibson. Those three guys, the snaps they get in games 2, 3, 4 are going to kind of shape this running back rotation the rest of the season.
Jeff, anything to add on those two running backs?
Yeah, I think for young backs that might be better off running in gap power schemes as opposed to zone schemes. I think it takes an offensive line a while to come together. I think you also got to have a back that's got really good vision, and maybe that just takes more reps. I think that actually bodes well for James Simon and Jarrett Gibson when you look at the percentage of zone runs to gap runs as Sark's tenure at Texas has evolved. They were a 66% zone team in 2021, and that's gradually dwindled down to last year. They were, and this is according to Pro Football Focus, they were 52% zone run last year. So it's almost 50-50. You go back to Baxter's freshman year, he had more carries on zone or gap gap power schemes than he did zone schemes. Yes. So Gibson had the same last year. I think he was 37 carries in gap schemes and 35 carries in zone schemes. So you've got backs now that are, I don't want to say more versatile than Bijan Robinson, but they're probably better at just running in a pure gap scheme. And when you're replacing 4 starters on the offensive line, that's probably, I think, more likely where your bread's going to be buttered as opposed to being almost an exclusive outside zone team like they were last year with a really good zone runner in Wisner and a veteran offensive line. Good
group of running backs overall. Really hoping for the health of Cedric Baxter to return to 100%. That would be outstanding. But I do think the age addition of Christian Clark and Jarrett Gibson being another year older will help the depth in that room as well. And I think it's possible that Christian Clark might be one of the guys that steps forward on this team this year that not everybody's counting on. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of On Texas Football, talking to the running backs, sponsored by our friend Dr. Brett Robin, the former Longhorn running back, now over at Austin Orthopedic Institute. They are taking new patients now with offices in Killeen, Georgetown, and Austin, of course. For Gerry Hamilton, Jeff Howe, and our producer, Matt Hutchison, I'm Bobby Burton. We'll see you after practice. Hook 'em.